Here we go. Okay.
So, I'm sorry. Good morning, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us. And I was able to catch a little bit of Joe McVeigh's speech this morning. The man is a dead ringer for the governor of Pennsylvania. So if you saw that, I was so surprised that the governor of Pennsylvania dropped into the meeting today. I thought we were going to get big news, but the session was great. I had to leave a little early, of course, to get set up for this. Um, uh, just a little overview on what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about the story of what happened when we brought a group of diverse practitioners together to look at a really persistent problem of practice familiar to many of you, and that's related to the intersection of mathematics learning and learning the English language together. Very thorny and persistent. Our particular story is set in a first grade classroom, but we really think it's applicable across grades and different contexts. So, next slide, please, Sandy. Quick overview of what we're going to do today. We're going to start by setting the context for everyone and show you how how this group of people identified this problem of practice. In particular, it's about math probes being used in the classroom and our inability to get really useful information from them for English learners. We'll share some simple tools and protocols, and we're going to give you a short opportunity to try some things out, or at least explore them a little bit. And we will leave some time for questions and discussions at the end. Next slide, please. I'll briefly introduce our group, going clockwise, starting from the upper left-hand corner. That's me. I'm Laureen Avery. I'm the director of the Northeast region for UCLA Center X. I live in Rhode Island, and that's where I'm coming to you from today. Dr. Allison Bailey is a professor at UCLA's School of Education, and she's the PI for the Excel work. Heather Brown is a first grade teacher in the Shelton Public Schools, located in Connecticut. Christine Butler is a TESOL teacher and Excel coach for the Shelton Public Schools. Gaviju Perez is a math specialist for the Norwalk Public Schools, also in Connecticut. And Dr. Sandy Chang is an educational consultant based at UCLA. The Excel Leadership Academy, doing all this work, is a partnership between UCLA, a number of public school districts across New York, Connecticut, and Rhode Island, and a few other partners. And all the work is focused on supporting K-12 teachers who are working with English learners in the classroom. This work is supported by grant funding from the US Department of Education through OELA and the National Professional Development Project. I'm sure lots of you are familiar with that. I'll invite you all to drop thoughts, comments, questions into the chat box. We'll monitor them and hopefully get the opportunity to address them all. So thank you and enjoy.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Gabriela. As Rini presented, I go to the group as Gavi. Just briefly, we wanted to talk about the purpose of the community of practice today. And just like any action that has an underlying and core established purpose, our purpose is to develop a protocol in order to adopt pre-unit probes in order to capture among English learners both the mathematics as well as the language content. In addition, these sections and tools would support our classroom assessment practices and become an engine in order to generate for students usable math and English language progressions that are critical to drive instruction. May you move to the next slide, please, Sandy? Okay. The problem of practice that we were able to identify as a group is trifold. First, the original district math probes did not generate responses, both oral and written, for English language learners that we wanted to capture prior to drive instruction. In addition, teachers could not tell if a student had the math concepts being probed or if they just were not ready yet to express themselves through language. And the probes also seemed they needed to be adapted in order for students to allow ways to respond fully any prior knowledge that they brought to the topic in order for teachers to implement meaningful and differentiated instruction for the units of study. So how did we all begin and how did we really derive at this unique point, which was formative assessment, and why we saw the need to adopt it? The story comes from a much broader data-driven decision, which on the next slide, you will notice that as a district at the time prior to moving to Norwalk, I worked in Shelton as one of the supervisors for teaching and learning. And with any decision, we looked at data. What is our data telling and where are the needs for our population? On the screen, you will see our Connecticut assessment. It's the Smarter Balance. And in mathematics, the students are tested for both achievement and growth in grades 3 through 8. And by looking at trend data from 2015 to 2018, so the 4 administrations, we saw that in Shelton, as the total population increased, so we see in 15-16, 82 students, and in 2018-19, up to 104 students. And we noticed that the achievement gap between population that were L learners as well as non-L learners, it remains to be a notable gap. But in particular, since in 2015, when Shelton started to work very closely with Project Excel in assisting English language learners and bringing strategies for academic achievement, we noted that while Connecticut had a very small margin of growth. So if you notice in 2015, 2016, the L population in Connecticut at 9.6%, and the last administration in 2018-19 at 14.7%, you have an increase of 4.2% in this trend data. However, in Shelton, that academic gain is as much as 14.3. But the question was, why did we have a drop from 2017 to 2018 administration with our L learners, and what could we do as a district in order to close the achievement gap, as well as increase our subgroups or our high needs group performance. So focusing with EL learners and working closely with the team with Project Excel, we looked at, okay, if we are to develop mathematic knowledge, we ought to develop mathematic language routines, which brought us to the importance of the DLLPs, which is the dynamic language learning progressions, identified from the Project Excel team, as you can see in this slide. So those are some of the features for the language learning progressions that kind of made us realize that our prerequisite probes were not written in such a way that provided opportunities for our L learners to demonstrate both mathematic content as well as their language development in order to bring meaningful prior knowledge in order for teachers to guide their instruction and as well as provide opportunities for differentiation. So on the next slides, my colleagues will have an opportunity to explain and also demonstrate to you the difference between the prerequisite probes and how they were adopted, as well as the information that was extracted from students with more meaning after adaptation, leading to more meaningful instruction.
Hey everyone, I'm Heather Brown, first grade teacher. I began working with the team last spring and I was just starting to teach a geometry unit to my students. So we took a look at the prerequisite probe that was used in the district. And so I would give this as a baseline just to introduce the concepts and then use it to differentiate my instruction. However, in the years that I had been giving it, you can see if you look at the questions that oftentimes the responses would be left blank and there wasn't a lot of information that I was actually gaining from the probes. When you look at the probe, you see the first few questions is just asking students to identify the 2D shapes by name. Since that is a kindergarten standard and scale, most students could remember those and were able to write in or tell me what the shapes were. If you look down further, the next question, what is the difference between a defining and non-defining attribute? That required students to be able to know and understand the content vocabulary in order to answer the question. So you can see that this first example we have is from an L student, and the first response we get with the original probe is that they don't know the words and they have no idea what a defining or non-defining attribute is, which doesn't give me a lot of information of what they already know about shapes.
Again, this is Christine Butler, TESOL teacher, working with Heather in the group. And I'll jump in here just to reiterate back to our problem of practice that initially these probes were given in the beginning of each unit with really the idea on the teacher end that the children, almost all children are not really going to know these words. And so we are taking time out of instruction to give the students this probe to, again, what was the purpose of it when we're already giving it, really not even sure that we're going to get any information. And so as you see, as Heather said, this is not a surprise to us when students are saying they have no idea what the words mean.
If you take a look at the last question, this L student answered what or describe what makes the shape 3D. She was referring to those 3D glasses that you might wear if you go to the movies, which we thought was a great connection because she did recognize the word, 3D, but not necessarily what we were looking for when we looked at the proof.
I'd love to jump in again to say that this assessment was given over a Google Meet. I was the person that was working with the student. And again, as a first grade student, her mother was right next to her. And when the student answered about the 3D being connected to the glasses and it was red and blue and it was metallic-y, her mother was so very excited that she had gotten the answer correct, because the mother said, "Oh yes, we went to the movies a while back and we wore the glasses and we saw it in 3D." So it brought to light certainly the differences in folks' background and experience with language, not only as a student, but as a parent who is also learning English. Can we move to the next slide, please?
This is our response from a native English speaker, and you can see again the first three, they were able to identify the 3D shapes. When you look at the difference between the defining and non-defining attribute question, you get a little more information, but it's still a little unclear whether or not they know what a defining attribute is and what a non-defining attribute is. They do tell us that there are points and it is closed and that it's size and color. When it comes to describing what a 3D shape is, you see that she only mentions that it has two sides. Go ahead. So we went through the questions and as a team talked about how we can improve them and make them better. So you'll notice that on the left, we have the original probe, and then on the right, that was our modified. So for the first one, we did stick with the 2D shapes because we did want to review the kindergarten standard. So the only differences that we made were just to make the shapes more uniform. So the thickness of the lines are the same, and then we took away the color so that students were only looking at the 2D shapes. They weren't thinking about any attributes or any differences between the shapes. Next slide. When we looked at the difference between a defining and a non-defining attribute, we wanted to take away that content area vocabulary and simplify the language. So as a team, we discussed how when we look at that question at first, we're really focusing on the student understanding the language. And, we really want to just see what prior knowledge they have with these math concepts. So we decided to change the questions to just thinking about how the shapes are different and how they are alike.
When we took away that defining and non-defining attribute language, and as you will see in subsequent slides, our goal was to really get at what students know about shapes, because they do come with knowledge about geometry and other things, and they might not know that something is an attribute, but they're going to be able to tell you about shapes being different and the same in their own way. And again, it's just then connecting that information that they already have to this content vocabulary. But again, we wouldn't have that opportunity with the original probe.
And then our last question, again, what makes a shape 3D? We noticed that again, really focuses on the vocabulary and the language and them understanding what a 3D shape is. So when we changed it, we wanted to simplify the language again to just them telling us what they see when they look at the shape, but then giving them a visual of a 3D shape so that they can look at the picture and use it to kind of describe what they're looking at. And then on the next slide, we're going to see a video, and this is just a video clip that goes over Allison's reactions to our original probe.
We really need to break that down so that you get more information from it. So that's what struck me. That's just because of 20 years of looking at test items and wondering where they actually introduce irrelevant information to teachers because of that kind of a barrier that's been put up by a lot of the wording of the task or the test item. And so just basically pulling that apart so that you can still get something useful. And we talked about how starting where the kids are and what language they bring to this would also be very informative for you. So you do know ultimately when you take them through the unit where they began, and then what kinds of new language they put onto these concepts by the end of the unit that you've worked with them on over a period of time. And so that pre-post, in a sense, hopefully will be more meaningful for you instructionally when it comes to understanding what kids do actually bring to the task at the very beginning. We really need to break that.
So again, our focus was to simplify the language and use more visuals so that I can get some useful information from students instead of going towards, our original responses, which where I don't know, I don't understand the vocabulary, I can't answer it, or for some students, just leaving it blank. I wanted to see what they already were coming into the classroom with, what prior knowledge they had based on experiences from kindergarten, from the previous grade level, so that I knew how to differentiate my lessons in the unit, to meet their needs. So if you look at the top, the sample of student 1, in the first probe, the original, she did not have any idea, did not understand the words. When we changed the question to focusing on what's the same and what's different, we got a lot of more information from her. She was able to tell us that shapes have sides and that, you know, the difference between the square and the triangle were the number of sides. So even without knowing that she was giving a defining or a non-defining attribute, I'm still gaining that information from her. The same goes for our native English speaker on the bottom. While they did say that a defining and non-defining attribute is points or closed, and color and size, again, on the right, we have more specific information. She was able to tell me that the shapes are closed and that they are flat, and that a triangle has 3 sides and 3 corners versus the square with 4 sides and 4 corners.
I think that this is so telling too, because our original purpose was to be modifying things for students whose second, third, and beyond language is English. However, as we prove with the student sample 2, it also is helpful, it's effective for students whose native language is English. So we're really getting the most bang for our buck with getting information from all students of all levels.
It really does show us how powerful our language is and how just simplifying the language really allows you to get so much more from the students. When we change the 3D shape question, on the left, you see the responses from the original probe. And when we modified it to just looking at the shape and kind of giving that visual, you see that both students were able to identify that the shape they were looking at is a cube. So they do remember something about 3D shapes from the previous grade level. And for our native English speaker, they added that it was a solid and it was made of squares and had corners. So just being able to look at that visual was a lot easier for them to think about what they already knew about 3D shapes, which tells me a lot of information and shows me where I should move forward with them in the unit.
So as we looked at this process, we worked as a team to identify what is a protocol or steps that we all can focus, and as well as we can replicate with other teams or other peer learning communities can do in order to adopt any piece of work that they have put together for formative assessment in order to identify students' needs and drive instruction. So we have the 3 steps on this page, and we have 3 more on the next slide, which we will also have a handout to provide to you, and maybe look at an example at an original probe and see what are some of the changes that we can possibly do on that probe. So the first one of the first steps was to review all the original unit probes.
Gabby, did you want me to do this?
Say it again.
I think I was going to go through this.
Oh, I apologize.
Great. It's a great job. It's fine.
I
do want you to know that we have a handout. So in the interest of time, maybe we can just maybe highlight that how important it was to have both the native English speaking kids as well as the students who are English learners in our classes. And that way we know that both students benefit from better designed tasks. And also it tells us something about what level of English proficiency, a particular grade level, sort of what the target is, if you like, or what's typically expected of students from whatever language background they may have, and that we, in a sense, we're not going to hold our English learners to a higher standard than native English speakers. So I think that's a pretty big, it's an important thing to keep in mind as we make these task adaptations. So I just wanted to make sure we didn't lose that. And then the different ways in which the probes were modified. Whether it was because the wording was complex, because we did feel that a visual could be helpful. But if you want to carry on, Gabby, I think there's one more. one more slide with a couple more steps that people can take a look at. And if they wanted to replicate the process, they at least know how we worked through it together as a team. So back to you.
Yes, if we do go to the next slides, Sandy, where we see an original probe. Okay, so on this slide, you will see an original probe focused on Unit 1 for grade 1, and it's under operations and algebraic thinking. We would like for you to take a few moments to look at some of these examples, such as just 2 plus 4. Some of the challenges were to just use commutative property by just looking what number would constitute 2, 6 minus 4. And please jot down on our chat some of your thoughts and what would be some of the steps that you would take with your teams if you were to adopt this into a more meaningful prerequisite probe in order to extract any prior knowledge for students.
Sandy, do you want to advance to the next slide? Because then people can see what some of the modifications kind of, what some of the options are that we have seen looking at the probes. If you see any of these, some of these obviously don't apply in this case. This is one that's focused more on the mathematical operations and a word problem, but at least some of these things that you see listed on the left may need to be taken into consideration that may actually make the probe more accessible for our English learners. And then I don't know, Sandy, did you get a chance to capture any of those into one screen?
I did. Sorry, I had to unmute myself. I am capturing what you guys are saying in the chat, but I guess for time's sake and for me not switching over to my Word doc that I have, but a few of you said visuals could be used. There are some difficult words there. Have the addition together with visuals and subtraction from a different section. So those are some probe concerns. And Carol, thank you for the possible alternative as well to what we can do if as some changes that can be made to this original probe and assessment that was written for students. Allison, Gabby, do you have anything else to add from?
Yes, I'm also going through the chat, and definitely the need for more open-ended opportunities as well as using visuals are items that go very quickly into someone's mind into modifying this probe. So what we would like to do for time purposes, we would like to go to the next slide and show you what were some changes that the team was able to put together. But prior to doing that, we wanted to capture a little bit of the conversations that between myself, Heather, and Christine, originally, when we were modifying and adapting this probe, what were some of the conversations we were having and what we were reflecting on. And the next, upon the video presentation, we will show you what was the end result of the modifications.
I also just want to add that this is about a 3 minute 45 second clip. It was a longer, way longer conversation that Gabby, Heather, and Christine had, but we tried to shorten it to this about 4-minute clip.
If we look at the first grade question that's currently on the probe, it focuses on standard 1086, which is more about students demonstrating the strategies they know to add and subtract, like counting on or making a 10 and decomposing numbers. The current equations that they're given is just switching the equal sign to the front of the equation. And I know that a lot of times when my kids complete it in the classroom, it's kind of like a gotcha moment, and they're either, they get confused and it's not really demonstrating what they know for me. So when I really looked into that standard, I was wondering if we could change it to a number bond problem, give them the visual of 10 objects, and then have them take it apart, break it apart, and show what they know, instead of what we have there now.
I like that. I also saw somewhere in the standard the usage of word and same as, which, were critical, especially coming from kindergarten. So that can be added as well. Christine, you were saying something.
And I don't know, I know we don't want to overload the probe either, but I love that idea. And Gabby, what you were saying before too, it is so good. But I feel like, is there an opportunity for the student also to either explain the strategy or use some type of language to talk to or speak to either what they did or why they used it? I feel like that too can give us information.
If we do the fluency within 5 problems in the beginning for the kindergarten standards, what if we had like a little box with images of different strategies they could have used, where they can like circle what they use to help them or choose from those? I don't know, just a thought, so that we have a visual there for them.
Yeah.
Or we could have in the box, just give them space so they can do the strategy themselves. And so that way we're still seeing what they're using with all the problems.
We all agree that the challenge, as well as question 1 and 2, which is those 4, do not match neither the first grade, and as in the first grade one, as Heather said, is more like a gotcha, not rather which number is decomposed in these 2 numbers. And as far as the one that seemed to be prerequisite are incorrect, as they're using numbers more than 5. Putting that all together between Heather's changing, as well as I do like the piece of explaining and strategy. So probably, one could be a decomposition of a word problem, or students are using images. Maybe the second one, we can allow for opportunity. Can you explain? Or we can do all with can we explain. If you remember with the probe we did in geometry, we allowed for a lot of that. What are you thinking? So I like that you brought that back, Christine. Sometimes we forget. We're just so, we're trying to almost decompose our thinking.
If we look
Okay, so
at
as you noted, there was a lot of conversations and back and forth. And again, just as we're decomposing these pre-assessments, we are kind of learning from each other in understanding not standard itself, but also learning progressions and language development. So we wanted to demonstrate a post example. We went from just row addition and subtraction algorithms to opportunities for students to, may you circle, can you explain, or how many more books has at the other end, with opportunities to draw. So by drawing, as well as giving students lots of visuals, just like many of you mentioned in the chat. The next slide does capture a little bit of our work. which is done virtually through Google Docs, and the back and forth notes that we all left with each other. And again, it wasn't one day. Sometimes it took us a week and a half just to adapt one of these prerequisite probes, because of their influence would be critical going forward as far as building meaningful lessons and guiding instruction. The next slide, one of our members, which is also controlling the slides right now, Sandy, as we looked at some of these videos, we were able to look at how she captures through explaining contingent learning that this process not only gave us opportunities to understand what do we want from our students, what is the purpose of these prerequisite probes, but also it captured a story that we ourselves were going through a progress of learning and readjusting our practices. So we wanted to show you this video that kind of captures or summarizes our work.
A thought I had about the personalized learning and based on what Gavi and Allison and Christine just said, I mean, I think everything you're saying, I'm just like, oh my God, this is formative assessment, right? Because formative assessment is about contingent learning and being contingent based on the evidence of learning that you see within students, and how as a teacher you respond to that. Which, you know, we were saying here personalized learning, but I also think it's contingent, right? So based on the answers you get from the probe, from students, then those are springboards to where the teacher's like, oh, this is how I respond contingently based on what the student is telling me or writing. Then these are the next steps in the lesson, or these are the probes that I can give, or this is the responsive feedback that I can give based on the information that the student is giving me. And then I think another thing that when Gavi was talking about, I'm not quoting this correctly, but I know Margaret Heritage says this a lot, is it's not about conformity in practice. Everybody practices differently based on the contingent learning that they're seeing from their students, but it's more about uniformity in principle. So if we understand that formative assessment is based on contingent learning, which is based on student evidence, which is based on, you know, really well thought out probes and ideas about where the progressions in learning are, that's going to look different from every classroom. But if every classroom can think about learning in this way, then it's about this idea of uniformity in principle, but not conformity in practice.
So as we wrap up, we just have a very few minutes left. I thought maybe I would ask each of you in your, because you sit in different roles and different places in this partnership, just to say a couple of words about the authentic learning for you as a professional, what this meant to you, and what the impact was on the students that you saw directly or perhaps indirectly. So Heather, why don't we start with you as the person closest to the student, I think here.
Sure. So, like I said in the beginning, these were probes that we had to give at the beginning of every unit. And especially now, with time being so limited with students, I want to make sure that what I'm giving to my students to assess them is valuable to them as it will be for me with the information I'm going to receive out of it. So being able to work as a team to just look at these probes and understand how to take an assessment and look at it, and decide if it's going to, provide me with the information I'm looking for, was really important to me. So I think at the end of all of this, I can now look at not only our district probes, but if I needed a different assessment and I'm looking at, for something that's already been created, is it valuable? Should I be using it in my classroom, or, can I make it better?
Thanks. Christine?
I think for me on the TESOL teacher end, it just brought to light again how language, particularly now in school, plays such a role. And yes, we're looking at math probes for this example, but to really adjust your thinking about how questions are worded, how basically anything is worded, and how we can modify truly anything that we're providing students as a vehicle to learn. On the student end, I feel like modifications like this provide the student with the opportunity to really show and tell what they know, particularly English learners. Whereas a question might yet again be an example of something that, oh, I don't know that, or I can't understand. The way that we change questions and how it can happen in other content areas really gives a student value to what they know, the confidence that they can do these examples, and all of that social emotional piece too, tied to learning.
Thank you. Gabby?
I couldn't say it any different, Christine. That was wonderful. I want to add to that yes, learning is emotional, and as a math specialist, I have to remind the audience of the power of language. That language can trick us, and language can be complicated, but we can also, without dumbing down, so to say, the content, we can provide opportunities for students that they can bring forth their prior knowledge, because it is only then that we can move forward with instruction that it's meaningful. Because the bottom line is, we want these probes to really understand the learner. Where is the learner? What are some formal and informal experiences they bring on a certain topic, and how can I, as an educator, mold that toward a pathway that I can make them successful and gain not only content knowledge, but also help them develop their language as a new English learner.
Thanks, Gabby. Sandy, and then Allison with the researcher perspective in this team.
Allison, why don't you go first?
I just want to underscore how I think you'll get the sense that none of us alone would have gotten to this point. That this putting a team of folks together, each of us with different backgrounds and different expertise, really enriched this this entire process. And we're hoping that folks will see within their school context that there could be a team that can come together to have similar kinds of conversations. So the power of this community of practice was really the big takeaway for me. So thank you to everybody who's been involved in this.
And Sandy? Too?
Yeah, and one of the things that I noticed, everything that Allison, Gabby, Heather, and Christine have said, but one thing I noticed is having teachers collaborate is one of the things that I thought was a strength, and understanding the content. So the discussions that teachers have with each other, Gabby, Heather, and Christine, really made them understand the content better, and then think about how to apply that to students. So that growth, even though they were having these discussions about the probes, really got into the deep content of what that standard is and what students need to know.
So if you'd put up the final slide, please. I want to thank everyone. We went over a little bit, so I'm going to stop talking. But just to let you out, we have the handouts, and the handouts are up now. The slides will be up by Monday. And if you have any questions, or you're interested in learning more about Excel, joining the network, there's my email address. Please feel free to get in touch. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think we have to log out or no?
We should end the meeting.
Okay.
Thank-
I'll end that meeting.
Yeah,
Okay. Yay, team. Thank you all for joining us.
thank you.